Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Tell Your Story. My name is Todd Nesloni, and this Tell Your Story is going to be a little bit different than the ones we've had in the past. If you are joining us live today, you know that in our United States of America right now, we are in a different world. We are in a world of protests and writing against racism and making sure that we are standing up for what's right and identifying our issues and where we can get better. And I had originally invited Sheldon Eakins on here today to do a traditional Tell Your Story, but in the light of things, Sheldon and I both kind of struggled with this being your traditional story. And Sheldon, you reached out last night and said, I'm struggling with some things and I'd like to take a different approach. Share with my viewers first who you are. Thank you for being here. Of course, I'm a huge fan of your work, so I'm glad you're here to begin with, but kind of share who you are and then kind of what you reached out with me last night and where this conversation is going to head today.
Hey, thank you, Todd. And I appreciate you for inviting me. And it's funny because I had been looking forward to meeting you and sharing with your audience and having a conversation. So my name is Dr. Sheldon Eakins. I am the host of the Leading Equity Podcast, the founder of the Leading Equity Center, and I'm also a special education director out here in Idaho, and I work on a Native American reservation. I was excited, and I'm still excited. However, what happened is over the weekend, last week, for example, I watched Ahmaud Arbery get killed just jogging. Then I'm dealing with that and trying to process all of that. And then I see George Floyd be choked out on camera, and I'm watching this. And as a result, I just mentally with everything going on, and there's others that have been killed recently. There's Breonna Taylor. There's so many people out there that have, Black people that are unarmed, and they get killed. And then the comments that start to come in on social media, and it's almost like there's just this division where I'm going hard on my Facebook to respond to people who I thought were my friends, who have made comments. And just mentally, as of last night, I just wasn't there. I was like, I know I have this interview to do with Todd, and I'm not prepared. I'm not going to be 100% because this is really hurting me and impacting me as a Black man raising a Black child, or Black children, a Black boy, and it's been a lot. So I reached out to you and to tell you basically, look, man, I can't do this. I'm not going to be able to be on the show. And I'm thankful that you were understanding and that you said, look, I actually want you to share your story. And so here we are. So again, thanks for having me.
Well, Sheldon, last night in our conversation, you said something that really struck me. Is you said, I'm tired. I'm hurting from watching all of this and having it be so personal. But you said, we go to the grocery store every week, and I didn't even want to go to the grocery store because I knew I wasn't going to see anybody like me. And when you said that, it hit me so hard to remember all the things I take for granted. And like you said a second ago, you're in rural Idaho. And so, the first thing I want to ask is, there's so many things that I think us as white people, we take for granted and we don't understand. And we see the injustice of unarmed men and women being killed, and unarmed men and women of color being killed. You mentioned George and Breonna and Ahmaud. And so I'm thinking about all these people who, we have an association with when we see it on the news, but there's so many issues that are not videotaped, that are not shared online. Talk with me a little bit about your own journey through this and just the aggressions felt towards yourself, micro and macro aggressions, and just how can we as a people, regardless of who we are, our Asian Americans, our white American, how can we be more than just performative allies?
Yeah. So yesterday. So normally on Sundays, we go to the grocery store. And again, living in Idaho, there's 0.8 percentage of the population in this entire state of Black people. So I'm used to being in white spaces everywhere I go, right? That's just my life. That's my reality. So microaggressions and all those things that happen on a daily basis. But I'm used to it. And I have my, my canned responses, if you will, my templated answers when someone says something. I have my ways of how I respond, but I'm usually in a good spirit, or I'm in a place to where I can have those conversations. Now, the thing about microaggressions, they catch us off guard. We're not thinking about it. We're just, living our lives, doing our own thing. And then all of a sudden someone hits us with a microaggression. For anyone who's not familiar with what that means, it's just basically an unintentional act of that triggers someone that is typically in a marginalized position. So saying that someone that's Black doesn't act like Black people, or saying an Asian American, oh, you speak really well, or speak good English. Those things are microaggressions. So I deal with those all the time. But knowing that I had to go to Costco, which is, a heavily populated heavily populated store, and having to interact and walk through the aisles up and down. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do it. I mean, even last night as I was voxing Todd, I'm on my way to the Pizza Hut to get takeout, and I didn't even want to get the takeout, but I had to get dinner because we didn't have groceries. So I had to go out and go do that. And the whole time I'm sitting there thinking, I had to get in my car and risk the police coming behind me. I have to, risk, I got to make sure that I'm going speed limit, making sure that I'm hitting the turn signals, everything. I got to be on point, make sure my license and registration is accessible so that if I'm asked to pull it out, if I do get pulled over, I don't have to open up glove compartments and all those things that I have to deal with. I'm thinking about that as I'm like, I have to go down the road, a 5-minute drive to the local Pizza Hut in order to pick up dinner. So those things I'm sitting there processing. I'm like, if I see a police officer behind me in the car, I'm going to do like I always do. I'm going to figure out what I can do to get that police from being behind me. So if that means for me to turn down a side street, I'm not even going this direction, but I see a cop behind me, I'm going to turn that way, or I'm going to pull into a parking lot or somewhere safe so that the cop can pass by and then I can continue on through my day. So with all that being said, it's a lot. It's a lot happening, because even when we had those conversations where it's like, well, if we would just comply, if someone was resisting arrest, and all these comments again that I'm just experiencing over this weekend, and it's just like, does that mean that person should die? Like that's because they didn't comply, or in your mind they didn't comply, that means that they deserve to die because of that? To me, it's just insensitive, and it's like you said, performative wokeness, if you will. Now, what can people who are non-Black do? Use your voice. Even because I have had a lot of conversations with white educators that have said, Sheldon, I wanted to say something, but I didn't know what to say.
Right.
I needed to learn more. I needed to be more educated. To me, a simple act of saying, this is wrong, we need to stop, police brutality is wrong, racism is wrong, just to publicly say that says a lot. But when we're silent, when we don't say anything, and then our reason behind that is because we didn't have enough information, or we just didn't know, I think we can do better. I just come from the heart. I've had conversations with people who say, well, I've said things in the past and I felt like I got attacked and all those things. I get it. I understand the trepidation that's there. But to me, it's really important that we say something. Okay. It doesn't have to be this articulate thesis or dissertation, all that kind of stuff. Just a simple, this is wrong. I'm with you. That's all I ask. That's what most people who are, personally experiencing these things, especially when it comes to racism, is to know that we're not the only ones experiencing this, and we're not the only ones hurt. But having that solidarity, to me, is very important.
And speaking for myself, I can say, I know at one point in my career, there was a time where I was afraid to say things because either I felt like I don't know enough to speak out about this, or I haven't educated myself. Because, I think sometimes as white people, we make excuses of, well, I need to learn more. So, and I'm trying. And it's like, somebody once told me a couple years ago, they said, go to Google. Like, you can literally Google. You don't have to wait for anything.
Yeah.
There are hundreds of books that have been written. Go read one.
Mhm.
Get on Google. Find your friends of color. And if you don't have them, now's the time to increase your circle and go and connect with them. And so I think, we as white people have made excuses, and I was one of them for so long, about I don't know what to say. I'm afraid of offending other people. But by saying nothing, it sends an even louder message of you don't support me. And I think, that's where I look out and look at my past and times when I didn't speak up. And I think my silence wasn't a form of me saying I agreed with the other people, but that's exactly what it came off of, is I agreed with the other side who said racism's okay, and who said that, and the whole idea. One thing I'd love to talk with you about too is sometimes when we see these things happen and people rise up and we start saying Black Lives Matter, which needs to be said during this time especially, the comments come back with all lives matter. And I know I've heard some really great responses lately about why that's not the point right now. Share with me a little bit, with people who may be listening, why that is actually counterproductive to Black Lives Matter.
If you watch someone, not even someone, a group of people continue to die, like with social media these days, I mean, there's constantly a videotape of an unarmed Black person getting shot and killed, or choked out, or whatever, murdered. And the thing about it is, if we go back a few years ago with Eric Garner and how he was saying, I can't breathe. And now here we go again. I can't breathe again. And if you consider yourself a good human, right, and consider yourself one of those individuals that cares about people, then and it doesn't bother you that you're not like, you're constantly seeing on social media and on the news outlets, someone else just got killed, and we're literally, a lot of people are just waiting for the next instance to happen. And that doesn't bother you at all, then to me, that's something you need to work on yourself. Because the reason why we say Black Lives Matter is because, and not all lives matter, doesn't mean that no one else matters. Right. But we're talking about what's happening right now. This needs to change. We're being treated as if we do not matter. The fact that we have to argue that we just matter. The fact that that we're going back and forth whether or not we matter or not, to me, is a problem. So with rioting and what's been really hurtful, I would say the most hurtful this weekend, Todd, is silence, right? There's been all this silence. People aren't saying anything because, whatever, I'm afraid, or I need more information, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But then you speak up against rioting and looting and say, see, this is not the way to go, Dr. King, and all this stuff, right? And those are your responses. So you haven't addressed Black Lives Matter, and you haven't addressed police brutality. Your response, the only time that you say anything, is the behavior that Black people are portraying when it comes to, we're fed up. We're mad. We're upset. Again, this keeps happening. And those who are quoting Dr. King and the nonviolence, violence doesn't solve anything. Okay, Dr. King is dead. He was assassinated. Why was he assassinated? Because he was, quote unquote, doing things the right way in a lot of people's minds, yet that wasn't right. Colin Kaepernick was taking silent knees in protest for police brutality. People were mad about that. That wasn't right. When is it right? What is the proper way to protest, to speak up and speak out against these things? There's never a right way, whether we do it silently or publicly. So there comes a point where people get tired of, trying to march and walk and signs up and protest and laying in the streets and dealing with all of those things, and they just get mad, they get fed up, they get upset, and they respond by rioting and looting. Because just to have a piece of knowing what it's like to take something from people that have consistently taken from them, have consistently oppressed them. I mean, Dr. King actually has a quote, and I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said riots are the results of people whose voices aren't being heard. We've done all the things that we're supposed to do according to what white people have dictated to us as far as how we're supposed to behave and respond to things that are against us. So people are tired of that. And if you can't understand, like if you constantly have, hey, excuse me, can you just treat us fairly? Can you just treat us fairly? That's all we ask. Right. And you've asked that multiple times and we're still being treated unfairly. And like what's going to happen? More than likely, you're going to get upset. Like at some point, there's a threshold, there's a breaking point to where you're like, I'm done with this. I'm going to try a different route because what I've been doing for the last hundreds of years hasn't worked. Hasn't worked, Todd.
Well, there was a powerful image that I saw yesterday on my Facebook, and being a man of faith, it really hit me, and it was addressing the people who say all lives matter instead of Black Lives Matter, and it said, you had the parable of Jesus and the sheep, and the one escaping, and him going after that one sheep. And how the sheep didn't sit there, the other 99 say, what about us? We're the 99. We're important too. And Jesus, it's like just what it's saying. Yes, but this one is the one who is left right now. This one is where my focus is. And I think that was such a reminder to me of, what? It's not saying all lives don't matter. That's not what you're doing here. But the point is right now, Black lives matter. Right now, Black people are being killed disproportionately to any other group. And most of the time, unarmed and for ridiculous reasons. I mean, there's no reason for a death, but you know what I mean. And so, that idea of reaching out to people of faith and saying, this is why we are just blatantly saying Black lives matter, because right now, that is the issue. Those are the people who don't feel like they matter.
Here's the thing, Todd. We celebrate or we recognize Breast Cancer Month, right? In October. Does that mean that all cancers don't matter? Should we say, you know what? Why is October the day that we recognize breast cancer awareness? Why is that a thing? Well, it's not that other cancers aren't killing folks and aren't an issue as a whole. It's just this is the time that we're spending to highlight or focus on a particular type of cancer. So it's not that all lives don't matter, but this is a moment where we're focusing on Black lives. If you watch the news, unless you've been under a rock for forever, that's an issue. It's an issue that's impacting my community. I just gave you, when we first started talking about this, I just gave you all these reasons that I was not wanting to go down a 5-minute ride to go pick up dinner, or why I hadn't gotten groceries. Those are things that a lot of people don't have to think about. It's not a thing. I remember reading a news article where a Black woman was sharing how she met her husband, and on their very first date, she got in his car and she looked in the back seat and saw a car seat in there, and like some baby toys. And she was like, "Wait, you have kids?" He's like, "No, I don't have kids. I just heard that police officers aren't as likely to kill me if they see that I have a kid and have kids." And she understood. That's all he had to say. It was understood. They went on a date. They eventually got married. But just the fact that this guy had a car seat in his back seat and toys, that's how he drives around on his own, because he doesn't want to die. He wants to survive another day, and that was his way of surviving. But we got to do more than that. Right? We got to do more than just survive. We need to be able to be treated fairly. We need to be treated equally, and that still hasn't happened yet.
You know, and there's so many of us who are white who have completely taken that for advantage. And when you don't hear those stories, when you don't open your eyes to those injustices, you're blind to what's happening. And then you sit there and think, why are they marching? Why are they doing this or that? Why? I don't understand. Like, the police aren't the bad guy. It's like, this is so much deeper than that. And you know, Sheldon, one thing you said at the beginning, and as I've talked to a lot of my friends of color, is that their fear for their own children and their conversations they have to have with their own kids during times like this. What are you telling your kids?
That's a good question, and it takes me back because when I was a kid, me and my brother. So my dad is in law; he's in law enforcement, and he always had, gave us a talk. This is how you respond when the police officers pull you over. You make sure you pull over in a lit place. If it's at nighttime, make sure you turn your dome light on. Make sure you put your hands on the wheel. Keep your hands on the wheel. Let the police officers know what you're going to do. If they ask you for your license and registration, okay, officer, my license and registration is in my back seat or is in my back pocket. I'm going to reach down in my back pocket and I'm going to pull out my wallet and show you my license. Literally tell the police officer everything that we're going to do. That's the conversation my dad has had with me. I've been pulled over so many times, Todd. It's not even funny. And it's for simple stuff or for stuff that just being black, like literally pulled over for no reason. It got to a point, especially in college, I just thought this is what's supposed to happen. I thought everyone is experiencing this. I got my license late. I was 19 years old. I was in college when I got my license. And I didn't know that people weren't experiencing this, that this is not supposed to be a thing. It was later that my dad was like, listen, if the next police officer that pulls you over, you let him know that your father is a police chief and give him my contact information because this is ridiculous. So with my kids, my son, he is 7 years old and my daughter is 10 years old. They're young. So how do we have those kind of conversations with elementary age kids is kind of difficult. We can go all the way back to, I've been having these conversations since Michael Brown. So when they were like 4 or 5 years old, I was having these conversations. And as things start to continue to happen, I sit them down and explain these conversations to them. So now when we're driving on the road and they see a police officer, Daddy, there's a police officer car over there. Or Daddy, there's a police officer over there. They pointing them out because they're learning about safety from being harmed. And they don't want anything to happen to me, their dad. They don't want anything to happen to their mom or themselves, right? And so that's the kind of conversations that we've been having since they were as young as they can remember.
Sheldon, one thing I think about as I listen to you talk and I see what's going on the news, and one thing I wonder is, how do you hold on to hope? How do you not lose faith in the system, in people, and how do you continue to believe that things can get better?
I'm just mad right now. I mean, you could ask me that maybe a week from now, but honestly, maybe 2 weeks. I don't know. It might take a little bit more time. But honestly, right now, I'm upset. Right. I'm upset, and I'm just tired of this. Mentally, I'm tired of this. I had a report that was due, as a SPED director, I had a report that was due yesterday. I didn't do it. I barely did anything, actually. And we as Black people, we're doing these Zoom calls, and we got to, try to, often we're hiding, trying to fight back tears and emotions because we have to show up to work. A lot of us need mental health days during these times because it's just how do we pretend like nothing is happening and talk about data and test scores and what's going on for online learning and all that, and we had all this stuff impacting us directly, and to not acknowledge any of these things and not to allow folks to take some time to process and to be ourselves. We talk about mindfulness and self-care and all that stuff. This is a time for a lot of us who need it. Like, we need this time. So, I mean, right now I'm mad. I'm upset, Todd. I am upset. I'm not even gonna lie to you. So ask me a couple weeks from now, and I could probably give you a better answer. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
Well, Sheldon, as we wrap up this conversation, when I do typical tell your stories, I end with a particular question. I'd love to end with that today, and that is, for the people who are listening or watching today, if they were to walk away with one thing, what would your one thing be for them?
One thing would be just speak up. If I don't know your demographics of your audience, but if you have white educators out there listening to this, don't be afraid to speak up. I know there's fragility. I know that there is, talking about race is a touchy situation for you. However, just a simple saying, I stand with BLM, or just a simple message saying, I'm tired of this. Especially if you work in a classroom, if you're a teacher and you serve Black kids, don't not discuss this. Don't don't avoid this conversation. Like, engage in a conversation. Allow your students to talk. You don't have to necessarily just be there to facilitate and mediate a conversation, but just be willing to allow folks to have those your kids to have those conversations without, avoiding it. And you know what? I don't want to talk about that. That's political. I don't want to be political. Not saying anything is political. So it's important that we address it, and we just say, again, you can just simply say, this is wrong, but at least address it.
Well, Sheldon, you have been an inspiration of mine for quite a while. I've followed you for a while. I've attended your conference, which was one of the best things I've ever attended, put together. And I greatly appreciate you coming and having this conversation that I know is a difficult and an emotional and a taxing conversation to have. But I hope that for people listening today, that they continue to educate themselves. They continue to stand up against racism and injustice, and let their voices be heard, and not sit in fear, because things aren't going to change until more people do. And so your voice matters, Sheldon, and I am so thankful for you and for coming on today. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.